I just had a friend of mine here over the weekend, who happened to be a former colleague, a fellow coach, and now a friend. I mean, he's actually, this is interesting, he's actually Christian, right? So he approaches this entire thing from a belief kind of point of view, right? And we have this really interesting conversations, because when I'm talking sort of rational stuff about the information field and how it all works, and then one can't explain this, or I mean, at least that science is sort of trying to get around that. He then always refers to Jesus. And
oh, is that right?
Yeah, and it's really interesting, because what he then does is, because he's profoundly knowledgeable around that in the Bible, right? I mean, he then pulls quotes from the Bible, and then he says, and this is what's written in the Bible. And then when you then take this quote from the Bible and do a bit of okay, now let's exchange terminology. Let's not talk about this, but exchange that term for that, because it could mean the same. Then you can actually make sense out of that, and this is amazing. The same kind of experience I've just had when I was listening to an audio book of the Tao Te Ching, which is another kind of the Chinese religious or old wisdom tradition kind of thing. So what I'm currently figuring out by getting into those kind of things in more detail is really the fact that, well, it's not a fact, this is my impression at that very moment, that what these old texts basically say could be related. I'm very carefully phrasing my sentences, but could be related to this stuff as well, which wouldn't be a surprise from my point of view, because it would just mean that this is old knowledge which science is now rediscovering. Right?
Yeah. And everybody's got to see the world, or has to see the world, through their own lens and their own filter. And you're looking to change glasses.
Yeah. And it seems to me that that we are looking at this world with our set of vocabulary, with our terminologies, with our analogies, which we know, which we use to explain certain things. I mean, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about firewall and access rights and these kind of things. When we talk consciousness, for example, right? You won't find the concept of firewall in the Bible, I'm assuming. I mean,
not even Google.
No, that's true.
I'm sure there's Facebook though. So
yeah, Facebook is always there.
I think that was the Facebook. The first iteration was called U.S.A.
Yahweh.
U.S.A.
And then they installed an update.
Exactly. Then it crashed.
Yeah, then it crashed, and then they came.
But I've had religion questions of late. It's interesting. I gave a talk on some of my research, and some lady came up to me and said, when you do healing, or when healing is done, or in your studies, does anybody report having the sensation of God? Mm-hmm. And I said, you got to give me more than that. You know, which one? And what are you talking about? Spiritual? Are you talking about a connection? Are you talking about a person? And she goes, oh no, I'm talking about a person. I said, no. If you're talking about a connection, I could say yes, but I can't say that someone's come up with a feeling of a particular person.
Yeah, with a white beard.
With the white beard, yeah, and she was thinking of the white beard thing. And I've also had in the healing stuff, not too long ago, a good friend of my brother's has a kid who developed an aggressive brain cancer. Mm. And it's a cancer I have treated before, and so my brother's very close to this kid, and said, "Can we fix you? Is it okay?" And the kid said, "Yes, but I have to check with my parents, even though she's in her high 20s, and her parents are Jews who became born again fundamentalist Christians."
Okay, and
so they said they wanted to know, in what name do I heal?
Okay.
And I said, I don't have a name.
Yeah.
I look into healing, and it's interesting stuff. And by no means have I even remotely unraveled what this is. And they said, so this is what they heard. You don't heal in the name of Jesus. And I said, no, I don't heal in anybody's name. And they said, well, then we can't let you treat her. And my brother, of course, started going crazy. Yeah, and he said, so you'd rather that she died? And they said, yes. And the reason is, and it becomes rational, the reason is because she'll die from this, but at least she will die pure, and she'll go to heaven, and they will see her soon enough in heaven. And if there's not healing in the name of Jesus, then there's a chance she'll go to hell.
All right. Okay.
So in the grand scheme, what's a life? And so you're alive for a few years, but we're talking about eternity, and they'll be back with her in eternity.
Yes.
Soon enough. So she just gets to go first.
Okay. It's like a meeting room, right? I mean, a virtual meeting room.
A virtual. Yes, it's a virtual meeting room, and they have the entrance card, and if you don't have the right entrance card, then you're screwed. So it's if you start with the premise, their metaphysical system, then they're being completely rational. They're being good parents.
Yeah, I mean,
if you start with a different premise, then this is crazy talk.
Yes, and this is interesting because if we could facilitate a conversation about that very question, that it is the premise which basically determines the decision, and that this premise is, I mean, in my terminology, this has a strong relation to what I call the worldview, right? I mean, depending on the worldview, they either deny or allow a healing treatment because it comes with the wrong or the right label. I mean, okay. Okay.
Everything has to come explicitly from Jesus, or you're out. So there's only one way, one box, one system, one set of truths, and they have it. And any deviation from it is wrong. And we can look at this, at least I'm looking at it as an outsider, because I don't believe their metaphysical system. And you look at it, and at first you have a visceral response. But after a while, if you start with the premise, they're being good parents, and they're loving, and they're actually rational.
Yes.
And so, this kind of thinking there with the right premise is rational. Martyrdom is rational. All these things are rational. Yeah. If you start with the premise. And the problem we have is that you're starting from the different worldview and a different premise and a different set of faith-based assumptions. And the reality is the folks that you're talking about with green and red worldviews and all that, it's the same kind of thing. Yeah. You're starting with a unprovable but evidence-based, but evidence itself starts with a premise.
Yes.
And the scientific method is also a series of faith-based assumptions that are never questioned. So if I go about using this method, and if I use this method, I come to, very loosely, truth, it's the same stuff. And so we all, I think, operate on faith to some extent.
Yes.
Experimental design is faith-based because it presupposes that I mean, the most simple thing, you have experiments, for example, and if I take subjects and I split them up into two groups randomly, this group is independent from this group.
Which is only an assumption.
Which is an assumption. I mean, my data indicates otherwise, in which case all of experimental design collapses.
Yes. So I think if we want to take those assumptions, these presumptions into consideration, we need to have a certain flexibility to understand these different viewpoints, right? We need to, as you say, I mean, you can understand when you when you look at it, those people are loving and caring parents.
Yep.
Because they feel that from their point of view, it is the right decision to deny a treatment or to avoid a treatment offer.
Yep.
So I think this just underlines the necessity to have this ability, which I call worldview agility. I mean, you have got different worldviews.
Yeah.
Right? You have this or that. And then to be agile, because when you are just stuck in one worldview, you will never understand the position of the other, or the perspective of the other person. So I think the worldview agility at least offers the flexibility to look at it from that point of view, and then to look at this from that point of view, and then to decide what makes more sense, right? I mean, you're not just stuck in a box, I think, because this is what I sense. I mean, I think we have got radical kind of positions of people who radically believe that whatever they see is the truth.
Yeah.
And I think it is like lifting them out of the box to say, okay, yeah, we understand there's your box and there are other boxes and other worldviews, and look at them and see whether they make sense to a certain degree. And then all of a sudden we've got a choice, right? And we've got a self-informed choice, which allows us to do something. I mean, I could imagine some people will still get back to the box where they come from and say, yeah, but I've seen all of the other stuff, but I'm still here. And I think this is okay. But to at least sort of shake the tree a bit and to sort of get them a bit wider scope of where they could look at and what might be out there, I think this would be a good starting point at least.
And I think even before agility is the recognition that you're in a box.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So before you can go playing around, because it's like fish trying to find water. They can't find water.
Yeah.
They don't even understand the meaning of water. They're just in it. And so you don't seek water. This is your life. This is your world. Only if you're outside water can you see the fish are inside water.
And the thing is that this water is then a certain concept, right? And they then have like this woman which you were referring to, they have a certain concept of what God is. So they are actually looking for God in a healing kind of scenario. And if it doesn't show up as a man with a long white beard, then they are actually disappointed and the healing has nothing to do with God.